James, where do you want me to start from here?
Yeah, start from there.
Are you switched on there, James?
Yep. Can you see me?
No. Oh, well, that's because of this. Oh, no, that's not working. Is it all looking all right on the area?
Yeah,
or
fine.
plug it in and stuff?
All good.
So that's.
Did you get a video earlier?
What's that? Yeah, it was looking fine earlier.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's plugged it in. Input 2.
Yes, if that'll work, I think. So should I get it here? It might be worth it, yeah.
Working?
No. Nice. Is there a different cable we can try? Yeah, swap it for that one.
These cables are just duds.
Whole box of new cables. Literally arrived like 2 days ago. There we go. That's got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. We're good to go.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to the this special guest lecture brought to you by the Royal Armouries. I'm Matt Bennett, I'm the museum's research manager. Thank you for joining us today. As you may have been able to hear, we've had some technical difficulties. We think everything's more or less working now, but apologies for the disruption and for the late start. The Royal Armouries, for those who don't know us already, is the UK's national collection of arms and armour, which began life as a medieval stockpile of weaponry. We now operate across 3 sites: our historic home at the Tower of London, our main museum at Leeds, and Fort Nelson outside Portsmouth, where we display the bulk of our artillery collection. If you're particularly interested in decorative firearms, I should note that the museum in Leeds is running a temporary exhibition. This showcases iconic objects from the museum's firearms collection: gold-plated assault rifles and submachine guns, including a Kalashnikov associated with the Saddam Hussein dictatorship in Iraq, a 357 Magnum finished with white gold and platinum and inset with over 300 diamonds, and a set of matched firearms and accessories bearing the monogram of an Empress of Russia. This runs until the end of June, so you do have a little bit of time to visit still. For more details, go to our website. Now, whether you're able to join us in person or not, we have plenty more lectures coming soon. You can attend these either online or in our museum in Leeds, and you'll be able to watch again after the event on our YouTube channel. All the details are on our website, which is royalarmouries.org. So just some other technical matters. After today's talk, we'll be taking questions from both the Zoom Q&A and the YouTube chat. Just drop them in there as soon as you have them, and we'll come to them after the end. You can also add captions if you're hard of hearing. There's a CC button at the bottom of the screen in both Zoom and YouTube. Unfortunately, I've spoken to the Zoom technical team and we can't stop the Zoom subtitles appearing on YouTube without disabling them entirely. So apologies if it detracts somewhat from the experience, but we've erred on the side of accessibility. So with all those mundane technical factors out of the way, let me introduce today's topic. New York in America's Gilded Era from the 1870s to about the turn of the 20th century was a city of fascinating contrasts. On the one hand, you had searing exposés of poverty in Jacob Riis's How the Other Half Lives. On the other side, you had incredible displays of wealth in the mansions of the Carnegies and Vanderbilts. To explore one facet of that period, we have the representative of another product of New York's Gilded Era, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, in the form of its Maritza and Jan T. Vilcek's Associate Curator of Arms and Armour. I'm delighted to welcome to the museum John Bick. John, without any further ado, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark. So first, good. All right, thank you. We're in business now. Well, thank you, Mark, very much for the introduction. It's wonderful to be here at Royal Armouries again. So thank you very much for having me. Today we are going to be speaking about firearms decorated by the famous American silver company Tiffany Co. And outside of the American antique firearms community and museum community, this is I believe is a little known chapter in Tiffany's history. It's one of my favorite topics in the art history of firearms. So I'm excited to be speaking about it today to you. We have an exceptional group of these firearms at the Met. We have 10 of them. And they're some of the most beautiful American objects in our collection. And up until recently, they had not been studied in a very detailed and substantive way. But this is something that we were able to address in preparation for a major exhibition that I'll be speaking about in just a moment. And so I'm excited to share some of our findings from that work and also orient you with the topic of Tiffany firearms in general. So before we get started, here is what we'll just do a quick outline of what we'll be covering. To give ourselves some context, we'll quickly go over Tiffany Co.'s work in the mid to late 19th century and its inspirations. Then next, we will briefly look at Tiffany's foray into selling decorated weapons, so not just firearms. And then finally, we'll spend most of our time looking at a selection of the Tiffany firearms in the Met's collection, each of which is different and has its own story to tell, which illuminates different aspects of the broader group as a whole. Okay, Tiffany background. Now, Tiffany is, of course, a very well-known company around the world. Today, it's famous for its fine jewelry and silver and iconic blue boxes. But it began as a stationery and fancy goods store in 1837. It was founded by Charles Tiffany using a loan from his father for $1,000. And Tiffany partnered with his neighbor, John B. Young, to start his business. And in the years following, the business expanded, it diversified the variety of goods that it sold, and over time, it developed a distinct specialty and focus on silverware. Now, the revolvers that Tiffany decorated that we'll be focusing on in the Met's collection all date from the 1880s and the 1890s. So what we're looking at here, I wanted to show you some other objects that were made by Tiffany during these years, which I think provide a good aesthetic context for Tiffany's work on firearms. Tiffany's silver was renowned both domestically and internationally during the later decades of the 19th century. And this was really a period of exceptional creativity and risk-taking and technical and innovation at Tiffany. And this really shines through, I think, when looking at objects like these. Now, one thing that is important to note in looking at these objects, and which will be a recurrent theme throughout the firearms discussion, is the influence that we see in them from arts and crafts from around the world and from many different time periods. So ancient Greece, Japan, the Islamic world, and also Europe. And we'll talk about this aspect more in detail throughout this talk. There we go. Okay. Tiffany's silver division at the time was led by this man, Edward C. Moore. He was a silversmith himself, and he was the creative force who led the firm to this unparalleled level of originality and success since he became the head of silver design at Tiffany in the 1850s. Now, Moore amassed a vast personal collection of decorative arts of exceptional quality and in various media, ranging from Greek and Roman glass to Japanese baskets to metalwork from across the Islamic world. So this was thousands of objects. And he built this collection carefully and for a distinct purpose. And that was to serve as a source of inspiration for himself and also to educate and inspire the designers that he supervised at Tiffany. And here we're looking at an image of Tiffany's studio, Tiffany's design studio around 1885. And you can see that such objects are right there in the case on the left and elsewhere, right at hand for Tiffany's designers to use, as well as there was also a library, a vast library that they had access to as well for reference that Moore assembled. Moore's collection also included a variety of weapons as well, like this Caucasian dagger with a yellowed and gilt scabbard, dozens of pieces of Japanese sword furniture, tsuba, kogai, etc. And there'll be a number of other objects, another more weapons from the collection as well that we'll be looking at in a moment. And upon his death, Moore bequeathed his collection, his personal collection, to the Metropolitan Museum, where it was put on view as a group before it was eventually split up between the collections of the various curatorial departments, which is where it resides today. Now, this story of Moore's, his collection, his work at Tiffany, this is the focus of a major upcoming exhibition at the Met, which will be opening in June, entitled Collecting Inspiration, Edward C. Moore, and at Tiffany Co. And it will bring back together for the first time more than 180 objects from Moore's personal collection, with 70 silver objects designed at Tiffany under his direction, and which relate directly to the objects that he collected. And this includes several of our Tiffany integrated firearms. So this is the context for the research that we conducted recently on our Tiffany pistols, as well as our rifles. But Tiffany's work with weapons did not begin with firearms. It began with military goods, particularly swords. So Tiffany played a leading role in the design and the sale of decorated weapons in the United States since the 1840s. And during and after the Mexican War from 1846 to 48, and in the wake of the Civil War from 1861 to 65, the firm was the foremost American maker of presentation swords. And just as a visual reference for this, this is a page from a Tiffany catalog from 1862, so right at the beginning of the Civil War, illustrating various designs for presentation swords available for order. This particular page shows straight swords for generals. Now we know that at least by this year, 1862, Tiffany also began retailing firearms. In the archives of Smith & Wesson, there survived an order dated December 8th, 1862, from Tiffany for 100 Model 2 .32 caliber rimfire long pistols with 6-inch barrels. So it was around this time in the 1860s that Tiffany became a firearms retailer. And it is also around the time that it initiated partnerships with American firearms manufacturers, including Colt, Derringer, and of course Smith & Wesson. Now, it is likely that Tiffany sold most of these firearms unmodified, so the stock from the factory. And I am assuming this because no Tiffany marked firearms from the 1860s and 70s are known today, to my knowledge at least. But archival evidence at Tiffany from Tiffany archives does suggest that the company did decorate handguns in the 1860s and 70s. And we'll be looking at documents from Tiffany's archives a number of times today. And this is the first, and it is a page from one of Tiffany's ledgers, recording one of the earliest instances of Tiffany creating a decorated pistol mount or grip, here for a Colt Navy revolver numbered 1304, which is the silver pattern number, which predates the 1880s. And we'll be talking more about what a silver pattern number are in a moment. So this document, I should say, as well as all of the Tiffany archival documents that we'll be looking at today, were gathered up, not by me, but by my colleague, Medill Higgins, who's a curator in the American wing at the Met, who specializes in Tiffany, and she organized the exhibition that I mentioned earlier. And she was the one who began connecting specific pistols in our collection with documents in the Tiffany archives, which provided a starting point for a lot of the further research that we'll be talking about in a moment. So although Tiffany had retailed stock Smith & Wesson firearms since at least around 1862, the two companies entered a new phase of partnership beginning in the 1880s. They began truly collaborating to create highly embellished revolvers mounted with uniquely designed and exquisitely made silver grips. And these pistols were intended for the private market. They were advertised in Tiffany's Blue Book catalogs from 1890 through 1909, just like any other good. And here we're looking at Tiffany's 1894 Blue Book catalog, just for example, and you can see its little description of the luxurious pistols that it has available there. And these were created on a made-to-order basis. And today, around or less than 40 such pistols are known. The finest Tiffany decorated revolvers rank among the most accomplished and creative works that the company produced in the 1880s and 1890s. They aptly reflect many of the key styles established by Moore, including the Saracenic and Japanesque style. And the Metz group, two of which we're looking at here, was carefully assembled to express the great range of materials and techniques and artistic inspirations employed by Tiffany under Moore and soon after his death. And now, with that, we can take a closer look at some of firearms. Now, the first revolver that we'll be looking at is this one. It is among the earliest Tiffany decorated pistols to survive. And it's the earliest in our collection. It was made around 1883. And the grip is made of hammered silver, and it's covered on all sides by these pearl swirling salamanders or lizards. Now, the design drawn for this grip is preserved in Tiffany's archives, and it depicts the hammered silver mount, like laid flat or completely unfolded with these cutouts or notches in it that show that when you bent it around the grip of a pistol, they would all connect seamlessly and create kind of a hollow enclosure for the frame of the pistol. And this was the same manner in which Tiffany conceived all of its hollowware. And Tiffany seems to have constructed nearly every silver grip that it made for Smith & Wesson pistols in this way. So to accommodate this hollow silver grip, Tiffany craftsmen first removed the original hard rubber grips, which would have shipped with the pistol from Smith & Wesson. And then they filed down the protrusions on the steel frame beneath in order to make it easier to slide on the silver grip that they would make for it. And then the silver grip was attached in all kinds of different ways. In this case, the primary mode of attachment was the screw in front of the cylinder there. And here is a couple of pictures of me just holding the grip. You can see from the front there how it grabs around either side of the pistol and that it is hollow. Now, this approach to decorating enabled Tiffany's designers to radically transform the shape and materials of the pistol by essentially building a miniature sculpture around it. Now, this represents a remarkable departure from the well-established tradition of in America of embellishing machine-made firearms by engraving and inlaying directly into the steel surfaces of the firearm. And as an example of this more traditional mode of luxury revolver decorating during this era, I show you another Smith & Wesson revolver in our collection from 1869, which is decorated in the more classic manner of scroll work, engraved directly into the frame and inlaid with gold. Now, that comparison, I think, shows just how radical Tiffany's approach was. Tiffany firearms like this remained perfectly functional, but their ornamentation obviously did not improve their ergonomics. Their focus was really on the art, and not on usability. And the modifications, I think, also create this interesting tension between the handmade and the machine-made, the custom, exquisite silver-made grips, silver grips, creating a juxtaposition with Smith & Wesson's very precisely engineered factory-made components. And this tension is something that Tiffany's customers would have understood, would have appreciated it, and it was not something that would have been found elsewhere in Tiffany's product line. There are no other instances of a machine-made product like this being decorated by Tiffany at this time. Now, the design of this pistol's mount epitomizes Tiffany's Japanesque style of the 1880s, which you can see here in the form of a picture. And in looking through Moore's collection from around the world, which his designers were supposed to be using for inspiration and for reference, I also found this piece, which is a bronze incense burner, a Qing bronze incense burner with curled dragon handles. It's very similar in some regards to the salamanders. So maybe this was something that had to do with the pistol's design as well. Who knows? Now, Tiffany and Smith & Wesson promoted their partnership at the World's Columbian Exhibition in Chicago in 1893. It was attended by more than 27 million people during its 6-month run. And in total, Tiffany created 19 decorated revolvers for the two companies' respective displays. 10 were displayed in Smith & Wesson's booth, and 9 were displayed in Tiffany's booth. And all of these pistols are listed in the two companies' respective exhibition catalogs. So here, this is the cover of the first, well, it's the cover and then the first page of Smith & Wesson's brochure for their display. And it's not stated explicitly in the text, but the first 10 pistols listed here were decorated by Tiffany, and they're the most expensive, ranging from $150 to $425. And then below them and on the next 2 pages, which you can't see here, are all the traditionally decorated, engraved and inlaid examples done by Smith & Wesson factory engravers. Now, the most expensive Tiffany revolver in the group retail for $425. It's the top of the list, and it's illustrated on the cover of the catalog. You may recognize it from the title slide of this talk. This is it. It is exceptional as one of the most elaborate Tiffany decorated firearms from the late 19th century. Its trigger, its hammer, and its grip are all encased in sterling silver that's been delicately embossed and chased with floral ornaments in the Saracenic style. It has a carved ivory pommel that's quite large, and its barrel and cylinder are etched on sweep. You look at a detail here, which I think gives a good impression of just how exquisitely made the grip is. Here are 2 others. Now, the pistol comes in a white chamois case with an ivory tipped cleaning rod. And we are lucky in that we know exactly how Smith & Wesson's displayed this in their booth at the exhibition from a photograph. Now, it was featured in the company's primary vitrine inside of its chamois case, surrounded by dozens of other pistols. So it seems like they crammed in as many as they possibly could, which is interesting. Now, here's the pistol partially disassembled. You can see that it follows the same construction formula as the Salamander pistol, but in this case, we could not safely remove the silver sleeve from the frame. So you see like the frame poking out of the bottom there of the silver sleeve. Unfortunately, we did not know of a photograph of how that shows how Tiffany displayed their 9 revolvers in their booth in 1893. But we do know from the exhibition catalog which pistols they put on view. We do have descriptions of them. So from the descriptions, you can tell that their group aimed to spotlight the firm's mastery of a variety of different decorative techniques, including yellow, etching, exotic and precious stone inlay, and various other techniques as well. And you can see in these descriptions too that some of the pistols are pretty compelling descriptions. There's one that's described as an Indian armour style. There's Italian style. There's a rattlesnake handle, and all kinds of different materials listed. So most of the pistols that are listed in this group have been lost to time, but luckily several do survive, including number 210, the enameled pistol. Now, this pistol's grip is made of embossed, chased, and enameled sterling silver, and it is a terrific demonstration of Tiffany's renowned enamel work, which had garnered great praise, particularly at the previous World's Fair in Paris in 1889. And it is true that the mounts very subtle, sophisticated tonal variations distinguish this pistol, even among the other enameled wares that featured prominently in Tiffany's Chicago display. Its delicacy even rivaled their display's much larger centerpiece, the Magnolia vase, which you see here, and also has a similar palette as well. Now, a design drawing for this pistol survives in the Tiffany archives, and it very carefully details the enamel pistol's delicate color shifts. And the finished pistol, if you compare the drawing to the revolver, it follows these instructions quite carefully with very little variation. The grip integrates arabesque floral motifs with flowing scrolls, with the enameled elements appearing to kind of weave under and over and around the bare silver. So overall, this is a really, it showcases well an imaginative interpretation of Islamic art by the Tiffany designers. So this revolver's chased, etched, and inlaid silver grips ranks among Tiffany's more ambitious and imaginatively decorated firearms mounts. The grip incorporates multiple metalworking techniques, as I mentioned, but most prominently makome, which is a procedure originating in Japan that is designed to create intricate and distinctive marbleized or wood grain effects to achieve, to achieve these effects. And so in order to make it, the different metals are heated, they're hammered together into layers, and then they're folded and sliced so that the different colors can swirl together, as you can see here. Skipped a slide there, but so we realized in the course of researching the grip that the specific shapes of the 8 inlaid makome panels reference traditional Japanese motifs. So, for example, the largest panel on either side of the grip evokes this stylized conch shell or horogai, which is commonly incorporated into family crests. The smaller comma-shaped insert above it resembles either the tomoe element or it could be a reference to the Japanese magatama beads as well. And then the topmost panel, which is you can only see kind of the corner of, but it resembles the shape of a kojiri, which is the protective fitting that you find at the end of scabbards, Japanese sword scabbards. And on the pommel, the shape of that insert echoes the outline of decorative knobs that are commonly found on Japanese sliding doors. Now, these collectors of Japanese art in America, travelers would have recognized these allusions. And it also reflects Edward Moore's ongoing fascination with Japanese metalwork and design, and the specimens in his collection, like this small metal case, are what helped inspire and inform his own boundary pushing applications of that technique to works like our pistol. Now, makome featured prominently in Tiffany's display at the 1878 Exposition Universelle in Paris. And I'm thinking in particular of this vase, the so-called conglomerate vase, which epitomizes Moore's eagerness to kind of experiment with this technique's limits. And he applied makome to all kinds of objects, from clocks to cigarette cases to tea caddies to large, highly ambitious objects like this. But its use as a decoration for firearms was unprecedented, either in Japan or the United States, which is quite interesting. Now, many of the Tiffany revolvers, including this one, were marked by Tiffany with numerals that indicate two things, their silver pattern number, or their silver pattern, and their order number. And the corresponding entry can usually be found in Tiffany's silver pattern books. Now, these pattern books are quite useful because they record information, including the Tiffany's manufacturing cost, the date of manufacture, and how many iterations of that particular pattern were produced. So for this pistol, 10077 is the pattern number, and it is described as a pistol mounting in silver and MM, and MM at the end means mixed metal. That's referring to the Mahomet. Now the second number there is the order number. So this pistol is order number 7658. So in the ledger, the notations in pencil below the pattern number that you see here correspond to the specific orders of that pattern. So we can see that the mount for this revolver was made on March 22nd, 1889, at a cost of $115. And above it, obscured by the boxes that I put on this slide, you can see that there is another order for the same pattern made on the same day, actually, or finished on the same day, which is significantly cheaper, $44. Now, the cost in these ledgers indicates the manufacturing cost. It's not the retail price, which was often double or somewhere around double of the manufacturing cost. But here is that pistol taken apart, and you can see that it's constructed just like the others. Now, in the process of recording this pistol's marks, we actually discovered that it is not completely pure and all of the piece, that its barrel and cylinder are in fact later replacements. So here is the pistol turned upside down with the grip off, and you can see the serial number on the butt, 86305. Now, the Smith & Wesson Historical Foundation confirms that this single action pistol was shipped to Tiffany on November 22nd, 1888. But there are different serial numbers on the pistol's barrel and cylinder. And if you look closely, the barrel appears to have actually been renumbered to match the serial number on the cylinder. So that's another thing, but neither of them match the serial number on the frame. So this was taken apart, put back together over a number of years, and so it's not all of the piece, which is disappointing, but that is what it is. Now, the last pistol that we'll be looking at is this revolver, decorated in Saracenic style as well. Now, Tiffany made this ivory gripped pistol for the American railroad magnate George J. Gould, whose initials appear embossed on the back strap of the pistol, and also in a similar manner on the top of the box, which you can see there. Now, if we look at the marks, here again, we can see that they allow us to correlate the pistol with Tiffany's records. So the pattern number is 10075, and the order number is 7651. And it's described in the ledger as ivory carved, and was produced at a cost of $232. And you can see here, above it is a second pistol in the same pattern, listed above the ivory pistol. And this one is listed as etched, which you can read there. And it's also dated March 22nd, 1889. So a lot was happening on that day, evidently. But it's much cheaper. It's only $73 or $90 if the two amounts are added up there. And here is that pistol, that etched pistol, which is also in our collection. And its grip is etched with a buffalo hunt. And you can see that the grip is the same general shape as the ivory example. And I think that this might be the only instance, a really unique opportunity to study design variations within a single Tiffany pistol pattern. And it's easy, I think, when comparing these two pistols to understand why the etched example was much less expensive. So here is the ivory pistol partially deconstructed. Now, the high manufacturing cost of the ivory example is, of course, due to the mount's complex construction and also to its costly materials. It's composed of 7 different parts, several of which you can see here. This was, again, the limit to which we could take it apart without destroying it. So this pistol and the other ivory decorated pistol, which we're looking at, I think, you know, it's also interesting to think about them in the broader context of American firearms decorations at the time, because they represent such a remarkable elevation of that material's use on like on American firearms during the 19th century. And just as a point of comparison, like the factory ivory decorating deluxe weapons by Colt and Smith and Wesson, Remington and Smith and Winchester was all generally much simpler and cruder, honestly. You can see that here with this Colt, comparatively basic. Now, Tiffany's ornamental application of the material of firearms is, in my opinion, much more closely connected to the long and varied traditions of fine ivory embellished weapons from parts of Asia and Europe and the Islamic world. And here I just show you the butt of a Sinhalese gun from Moore's collection, 7 feet long. And so it's the only gun in his collection, and it is actually the first gun that to enter the Met's collection in 1891. So a really interesting piece from a lot of different aspects. And you can see that its butt is inlaid with these large, finely carved ivory plaques on either side. And I think that Tiffany was very much working in this spirit with its ivory decorated revolvers. So there is a lot more to be talked about with Tiffany Firearms, particularly their work with Winchester in the 1890s through the early 1900s until around 1909 when Tiffany stopped selling firearms. Really interesting topic that I'm working on at the moment. But that's all we have time for today. And I hope that this has piqued your interest in the topic of Tiffany Firearms, that you'll hopefully have a chance to see it, to see the group when you come and visit New York. And of course, the special exhibition starting in June and buy the catalog. Very good. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, John. Do you want to come join me for the Q&A session?
Sure.
There's one thing I don't quite understand about them. So when we look at some of the pieces in our collection of Henry VIII's armour, it's very obvious that he was able to wear that. Presentation swords for generals, I understand when they got an opportunity to put those on show. For civilians like gold, when are they getting the opportunities to show these off? Is it purely a display object, or is it something that they might be able to carry from time to time?
I suspect that these were really, I mean, the more elaborate examples, like Gould's gun, which is in near mint condition, was a presentation piece. I've tried to figure out the context in which he acquired it. I suspected that it might be a gift, like a wedding gift, or so I've looked for like occasions in his life in which something like that would have been given to him. I've and looked for descriptions in newspapers to try to figure it out, but I have not yet. But I think that really these were intended as showpieces that people would have inside their homes to show off. I mean, because they were quite unusual at the time, and they could be shot. I'm certain that they were shot. Some of them, I mean, almost all of them display some small evidence of use, at least, and evidence of handling. Some of the, even the more mint condition ones are a little bit rubbed. So, so yeah, but I think they were really meant to be kind of just treated like other very fine Tiffany objects that one would have in home.
Yes. And also other aesthetically beautiful and like most collection, although most premium is a little bit more practical. I was curious if you knew anything about how he collected them. So if he went out to the places and tried to immerse himself in the culture and acquire things, or was he buying from secondary dealers?
So this is something that Medill, my colleague, covers in great detail in the catalog and also talk about in the exhibition. But Edward Moore traveled the world and acquired these objects from all kinds of different places, from the countries in which they were made, from dealers. He was actively selling out of his collection and buying different things. It was a dynamic thing that he was constantly growing over many years. And I think that it's very clear that he enjoyed seeking out these interesting objects, and also books as well. There's another important part of the collection that he developed. But I don't want to underserve the topic. So really that's something that's covered in detail in the Dill's essay in the catalog.
Fantastic. And just another one in the context of collecting. Do we suspect, are there any suspicions about what happened to the pistols you mentioned being lost over time? Because it seems like their value as scrap would be considered less than the value of an aesthetic object.
I think various things happen to them. Sometimes they reappear. Sometimes, I mean, there have been instances over the past 5 or 6 years where extremely fine Tiffany decorated pistols in near mint condition in cases have popped up. I've never seen them before. And these are things that are recorded in exhibition catalogs, like the ones that we're looking at. So sometimes they're just tucked away and they reappear. Other times, I think that they get taken apart, like our Makame example. So you find sometimes in the market you'll find just grips, like separate grips, which you can buy, and so I think that they get taken apart, reassembled. Others, particularly the simpler examples, more simply designed examples, actually get used, and so they get very rubbed, and they're out there. And I think others are just kind of fall into oblivion. But I think there are a lot of different ways that they can be treated over time. So I think we're lucky to have the ones that we do, but it's hard to get a grasp on how many there are exactly out there. But it's only several dozen that I know.
And a question from YouTube. So Pavel Vichurin, apologies if I've mispronounced your name, but did Smith & Wesson mark or number these firearms first, or were they shipped to Tiffany blind?
They were shipped with serial numbers, and we can correlate these serial numbers. We can go back to the Smith & Wesson archives and find out exactly when they were shipped, who they shipped to. The interesting thing is that sometimes when Tiffany was preparing the pistols or and rifles to be mounted with silver, they would file off parts of the serial number. So there are instances where like one numeral is missing. So we know generally when it's shipped, but they were shipped stock, and so completely just as one would buy them, from a retailer. And some were shipped directly to Tiffany, and others were shipped to distributors in New York, from which Tiffany acquired.
And a question from Ethan. So we $425 at the time was the most expensive one. Do we know either? Have we got a figure either for what that equates to now, or alternatively for how much these guns go when they do, if they ever do, in the market?
I don't know what the conversion is. Obviously, it's a lot of money.
Yes. As I say, a very good site for that is measuringworth.com. That's got both for the UK and the US. That's got very good inflation calculations.
Okay. I don't want to guess what it is, but it's probably a lot. I don't know. I think, what was the second part? How much do they cost now? Is
Yeah,
that- Yeah. Well, you can, every once in a while, they do pop up for sale. And I mean, I'm trying to think of the last several that have sold. I mean, most of them, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the quality. Like you can buy a grip for several $1,000s, probably. But the really fine examples can go into the hundreds of thousands. But there aren't that many floating around.
So yeah, so if you got $100,000 or more lying around, you
A
know,
lot more. Yeah,
so you get
Yeah.
cost.
yeah.
On the cost, this is going to lose everyone in the audience, so I apologize in advance. I did used to be an accountant in my previous life, so I'm quite curious. How did they arrive at the manufacturing cost? Is that purely the cost of material or the labor element within that?
Again, this would be a question for Medill. Medill has spent years in Tiffany's archives. I in fact have never been myself. So all of the Tiffany documents that we looked at were documents that she handed over to me to analyze after she had done it. So and a lot of what I told you about how to interpret those documents comes from her. So I'm often going to go back to her and say, what does this number mean? Because they use all kinds of abbreviations that are impossible to interpret unless you've been looking at, you're really a Tiffany expert. So, so yeah, that's it.
So I'll draw you back up
Okay.
onto aesthetics then,
Okay.
if that's okay. Because I was curious, there's obviously a lot of borrowing of effective design, effective elements. Is there any attempt either by Tiffany or more generally at this time to create a specific American aesthetic, especially for something as American as revolver?
Well, we saw in the listing of Tiffany's pistols in the 1893 exhibition, there was this kind of the cowboy one, the very Western themed one. The Art Nouveau style in which both of our Winchesters are decorated could be perhaps interpreted as semi-American. But really there was, I think that the lesson from these revolvers is really the global aspect of the inspiration for them. But there are some revolvers that don't have that are just kind of completely separate from the global. Like I've seen some that are just covered in like in dots, like polka dots, and I don't know where that came from. I couldn't connect it. I mean, there's some aspects of it that are like kind of the shape of it was a little bit was like Caucasian in some ways. So I don't know. I suspect that there are some that are there are American. I'm trying to think. There are just so few that are floating around, other than the ones that we have, and so not really, but I might don't quote me on that though.
I suppose in these circles, it's somewhat of a disadvantage to have something that's, you know, domestic and vernacular. It's in a similar way to Mo, although obviously he's got the practical. You want to show how familiar you are with other design styles and how well traveled you are and stuff like that. Although I was interested, no other instances of machine-made objects treated in this way, but of course there's nothing quite as quintessentially American as the machine-made revolver or the machine-made gun in general. Royal Small Arms factory in the 1850s in Enfield, London, steals a lot of its ideas about manufacturing guns by machine from the Americans. So, I'm curious, how much does the demand of these kind of decorated weapons? Is Tiffany the only firm doing it for a very select clientele? We mentioned the manufacturers obviously. Are there other middlemen who are operating in kind of the same vein?
You mean like this, like creating these silver, you're talking about like the kinds of things that we're looking at, or just decorating? Okay. I am not, I suspect that these were created on a made to order basis. There might have, I think that there were some that were, like, for example, the ones that they made for the exhibition were obviously made on speculation that they would be sold, or given away, as gifts, as the ivory example, the one with like the big kind of garlic shaped ivory thing at the bottom of it, that was given away immediately after the fair to Walter Winans, and probably because they didn't sell it. So, I suspect that most of these things were commissioned with varying degrees of direction, but probably they would get a commission. It's in the, give me one in the Japanese style that's small or something like that. And yeah, so I suspect that it was a mixture, and I'm unaware of any manufacturer or any other partnership, particularly during this time where things like this were being made.
On that note, actually, Pavel on YouTube has another question. Are there examples of counterfeit firearms at this time? And how elaborate are they in trying to seem legitimate?
Probably. I've never encountered one. There are, when you get into I mean, there are all kinds of fake American firearms, and tech-rated examples. But specifically fake silver mounted Tiffany firearms, I have never seen one. There are some that are questioned, particularly like the early, like before Tiffany began its partnership with Smith & Wesson, and it was working a little bit with Colt, with Derringer. There are there's some interesting aspects of those, but like, I don't know, there are many other types of American firearms that are faked much more rampantly. So
I was going to say, presumably if you're faking, it's considerably easier to fake, say, an American Civil War revolver that's been used than it is something of this decorative quality.
I think so. And also the fact that they're all recorded in archival documents would make it impossible to, I mean, unless you had access to the archival documents and could correlate it with all of the different numbers and dates, which I suppose would be possible, but I've never seen it before, and I think that it would be possible to discern the fake, given the number that survive at fast comparatives.
So there we are. If you are there thinking of trying to fake a Tiffany revolver, not worth it. So I've just got one last question. I think we'll draw to a close, but it relates to the next. In fact, 1891 seems very late for the first gun to come into the Metropolitan Museum. Was there a deliberate policy of not treating these weapons for collection as objects of art, or was it just a coincidence and nothing had come into it by that stage?
I think it's coincidence. I mean, the collection was still young then. That was prior to the Department of Arms and Armor being founded. So the department was founded in 1912. Bashford Dean, who founded it, was there, was at the museum working a little bit more than a decade before then. He was a volunteer and then was its inaugural curator. But there's not, to my knowledge, any kind of there's no prejudice against firearms or anything like that. It was just just what it was, just I think by chance, and this was I mean, I'm glad that the first firearm that entered the Met was so interesting and unusual and special, and it's actually been the subject of researchers have come from Sri Lanka to look at it, and it's actually published in a book that came out this year, so it's becoming more well known now that it's been given this this platform. But just getting back to your question, I think that's just it's a nice starting point, but there was nothing before it that would indicate that there was any kind of issue with such things.
It's really interesting that the Arms and Armour department was founded so late because there's some medieval stuff coming into prominence. But I think I'll have to quiz you that over lunch. I think I'll save the audience from that. So I'll draw things together and so thank you, John, for today's talk. Absolutely fascinating looking, some very, very beautiful objects describing the dailies. So if people want to find out more, where should they go? So we've mentioned exhibition coming up, the catalogues, obviously. Any other recommendations, social media, blogs, the like that people can
So all of these objects are cataloged on our website. They have, most of them have pretty extensive catalog entries. Most of them have been photographed relatively recently. So they actually all of them have excellent photography. So that's the primary place to look for them. And of course, come to the exhibition, and a lot of the research that I was talking about today is in the catalog. We'll be there, be giving talks at the Met as well. So lots of different places to find it, but the website is the place to start.
Perfect, thank you. So thank you also to James and Laurie for oh yes, James.
You mentioned $425 back then. Just calculated, it comes to just $10,132 today.
There we go.
So £8,086.
Thank you, James. Fantastic. Yes. So $10,000 now, 425 then is a rough comparison. So thank you to James and to Laurie from our AV team for managing the event. Thank you to Josh behind the scenes for handling the feed to YouTube. But most of all, thank you to the audience for attending, for all your questions, comments, and engagement. So as mentioned, we have a full summer lecture program coming up. It ranges from medieval siege warfare to Indian revolutionaries in the 1930s in Bengal. The website is royalarmouries.org. If talk details aren't up there already, they will be as soon as we have them confirmed from the speakers. Alternatively, follow us on Eventbrite and you'll get details as soon as they come up. In the meantime, thank you again for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you later this summer.